The Gotham TV series couldn't legally give us the Joker due to an embargo on the Joker's rights, to be saved only for movies so as not to dilute the brand. In the place of the Joker, though, we got a new concept. The proto-Joker. Buckle in because this one's got a hell of a story and a hell of a legacy ahead. Welcome back, Gothamites. They don't make them like Gotham anymore. Since the show aired its finale in 2019, over the last half-decade, there have been numerous paradigm shifts in the entertainment industry, and you don't really get TV shows like Gotham anymore. We're living very much in post-Arrowverse times, and obviously Gotham wasn't part of the Arrowverse, but it's very easy to just kind of refer to that as like the Arrowverse era. But honestly, looking back, Gotham is still really special. It's incredibly compelling in terms of character drama. You get to see a number of ideas from the Batman comics interpreted into a live-action TV show on a budget, and that's just a thrill in of itself, and the performances are fantastic across the board. Damn it, this show had style. The production design of it was kind of timeless, and that very sort of kooky House of Horrors vibe has aged really well. There are shows from this period that you look back on and go, ugh, that's very 2010s by today's standards. And with Gotham, you could definitely see that 2010s DNA in there. They like to appeal to their Tumblr-centric fan base. But all of this still hits just as hard as it did back in the day. So this is kind of the start of a series of videos on the characters and world of Gotham. And we're going to start off with the fan favorite. A character who wasn't in every episode, was just kind of reserved for special occasions, stole the show every time he was on screen, but was also ultimately just kind of the culmination of this show's ability to just be ridiculously entertaining, while also being unpredictable and able to change. And that character is Jerome Valeska. Also his brother Jeremiah as well. But in short, the Joker of the Gotham universe. And it has to be said, there is a legacy to this portrayal of the character. Jerome Valeska would effectively go on to become a classic Batman villain concept in the form of the proto-Joker, an idea that has been played around a little since. And it does, of course, begin at Cameron Monaghan's performance in the role. Cameron Monaghan was the first actor to play the Joker in live action since Heath Ledger. And Heath Ledger's Joker was this huge pop culture phenomenon. Heck, you still see it on like social media, film discussion groups on Facebook. A lot of people hold the belief that no one could play the Joker after Heath Ledger. That was kind of the definitive live action portrayal of the character. And obviously, with Heath Ledger's untimely passing, there was a lot of sentimentality towards that version of the Joker, on top of the fact that, yes, Heath Ledger did turn in a damn good performance. I certainly don't view Heath Ledger as the only man that can play the Joker, but at the same time, I think that makes his Joker all the more special. He's one of a kind. He's our reimagined, real-world sort of terrorist Joker. Personally, when I think Joker, I think Batman the Animated Series. So while Cameron Monaghan's portrayal of the Joker definitely drew some inspiration, I think, from Heath Ledger, Cameron Monaghan undoubtedly gives one of my very favorite live-action Joker performances. I think he was absolutely a worthy successor to Heath Ledger's Joker, but I'd also say he is by far the best Joker since. You kind of split it up into three performances. You got Jerome, you've got his twin brother Jeremiah, who eventually evolves into Joke Man. We couldn't use the name. Alright, it's a means to an end, I guess. And I kind of thought at the time, well, it's a means of having Cameron Monaghan play the next version of the Joker as well. What Cameron Monaghan brought in particular to the role was that very high energy playfulness. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to go all revisionist on Cesar Romero, Jack Nicholson, and Heath Ledger. The Joker is a character that you can adapt in many ways, and that's going to inform the performance and vice versa. But with Cameron Monaghan, that kind of playfulness, that absolute glee at everything he's doing, that sheer charisma of the Joker was ramped way up to Batman the Animated Series levels for the Joker. And I think in season 2, once Gotham started to go for its more kooky, over-the-top, villain-centric tone, I think that was where Cameron Monaghan really came into his own. His first appearance in season 1, don't get me wrong, that was brilliant, but we didn't really see any of that playfulness until season 2. And this is where you can see how priorities really shifted from season 1 to season 2. In season 1, he was a very sick kid who had a severe breakdown. Kind of a sympathetic figure, but at the same time, very fucking creepy. Which was really a brilliant introduction to the character. However, then when we go into season 2, he is basically the Joker fully formed out of the box. It's just that he's not called the Joker. He even looks like the Joker, and he hasn't got clown paint on. Cameron Monaghan might be one of the most Jokery looking people in existence. He's got incredibly expressive eyes that he can also make look very kind of vacant and uncanny. He's got an incredibly wide smile. Hell, his hairstyle as well is very close to what it was in Batman the Animated Series. This is, I think, the closest we've ever gotten to having Mark Hamill's Joker in live action, outside of maybe the Trickster in that one Flash episode. But even then, the Joker is a different character to the Trickster overall, and he had that CW stankiness about him, PU. Like, you're not going to expect the kind of writing and directing that can support a performance like Mark Hamill at his best in the CW Arrowverse. I don't know what it was that they fed to the Gotham actors and directors, but I don't know, the leadership must have been better, maybe better networks, I don't know. I am generally opposed to the idea of ever actually revealing the Joker's true name. I much prefer that kind of multiple choice origin story. The Joker doesn't truly remember it, and he's got like an abundance of aliases, but no one actually knows his real name for sure. But after seeing Jerome rampaging around Gotham City with Theo Galavan's maniacs, I was pretty happy to call the Joker Jerome Valeska, because this portrayal of the character was just that compelling. As it was, I had accepted that Gotham was more of a reimagining of the Batman universe than it was any attempt at like a canon origin story for these characters. I know that the age gaps between Batman and his rogues were kind of a bone of contention for a lot of casual audience members, but at this point I think season 2 of Gotham established what this show was going to be going forward, and I could certainly get on board with it. So I could certainly get on board with the idea of the Joker being a guy called Jerome Valeska who grew up in Haley's Circus and was abused by his family. I will say, though, when it comes to, like, treating abuse as, like, the inciting incident for a villain origin story, those are optics that I would probably be quite cautious of, just because I think the last thing any real-world abuse victims need is the stigma of being viewed as someone who could become the Joker. I'm not saying anything definitive about whether or not this is problematic or anything. These things are incredibly case by case, and the Joker's origin story has always been one bad day, and then you just kind of build whatever off of that concept. And Jerome's story feels very much in line with that. So when he was killed off the first time, I was concerned. Are they going to get another actor in to be another take on the Joker? Because we've kind of blown our load already. Like, I feel like the audience and the fan base had already kind of universally accepted Cameron Monaghan's Jerome as Gotham's Joker. Looking back, I don't think they even needed to explicitly say that he'd be the Joker. Just have Jerome be a continuous threat, and then maybe he goes missing. And then we could figure out the rest. Somewhere down the line, he became the Joker, and people just forgot who he is, or maybe he got facial reconstruction or something. I think the intent with the Joker in Gotham was that Jerome was just going to be one of them. They kill him off, they tease his return. Maybe they could bring him back someday, because you did kind of see hints of Jerome's return in season 2 when his body was in one of those rebirth tanks at Indian Hill, where the experiments were being carried out by Hugo Strange, many of them involving resurrection. So, like, one way or another, we could have Jerome back. But in the meantime, we did meet a character called Jerry, who was kind of a female Joker. She served as an informant for Bruce Wayne when he was searching for his parents' killer, Matches Malone, in the episode This Ball of Mud and Meanness, still one of the best episodes of the series. Just the standoff between Bruce and Matches Malone is incredibly compelling. I'll one day have to do a video about just that, because it's fantastic. What's funny is, we kind of considered Jay and Jeremiah as like separate portrayals, yet we don't apply the same logic to Jerome pre and post rebirth. See, when Jerome was finally resurrected in season 3, it had a bit of a redesign, and it's quite divisive. I've heard some folks that say, why would you take the most Jokery looking actor in the world and then put prosthetics on his face? But then Jerome Valeska's season 3 look is pretty popular in the cosplay scene. I, for one, really enjoyed this look for Jerome, because while they couldn't do the white face paint and red lips and outright call him the Joker, they did bring in design elements of a specific version of the Joker, that being New 52 Joker, where in the comics he had the doll maker cut his face off, all to send Batman the message that there's no masks when it comes to the Joker. Gotham took things in a much more comedic direction. Jerome's resurrection was botched by Dwight Schrute, a former Indian Hill employee and member of the Jerome cult. When it looked like his attempt at reviving him hadn't worked, he instead decided to cut Jerome's face off and wear it in a bid to regain the trust of the cult. So upon waking up, one of the first things a cranky Jerome wants to do is go get his face back. By this point, the show is basically a straight-up cartoon. Jerome is now basically a ghoul, and his cult seem to respond to him like they have an infection from him. We're to believe that when he was on TV back in Season 2, this whole group of people in Gotham City basically just changed their brain chemistry on a whim and decided they wanted to all be like that. I think there are cool ideas that can actually be extrapolated here and can kind of be made into a bit of a meta study of the Joker as far as like the hysteria he causes in the pop culture landscape. The Joker is commonly depicted as someone who likes to act on impulse. To him, his intrusive thoughts are basically family, and there's something very liberating about that. It looks fun, and I think the reason why so many people back in the 2010s loved to dress up as the Joker and love to kind of envision themselves as the Joker. I don't think it's purely because we all wanted to live in a society or any bullshit like that. I think a lot of us just look at the guy and go, it looks like fun to be that guy. He's so genuinely cheerful and yet somehow invulnerable. Jerome taps right back into this, which is why he happily accepts his cult with open arms. And as far as he was concerned, this was all just one big party, even if his face is quite literally hanging off. I think back to Jared Leto's Joker in 2016's Suicide Squad, which is just an unbelievable bastardization of a movie, but I'll try not to harp too much on that. Jared Leto's Joker had tattoos, and the most egregious one was the word damaged on his forehead, because it just seemed so try-hard and pick-me. Well, according to David Ayer around the time, the origin of that damaged tattoo is a message to Batman. After the Joker killed Robin, as far as Zack Snyder was concerned was Dick Grayson, Batman quite literally smashed the Joker's teeth out. The Joker, now lamenting his imperfect metal smile, had the word damaged on his forehead because he believed his visage was perfect, but now he's damaged goods. Then there's Jerome Valeska in Gotham, whose entire face gets cut off and he just casually staples it back on and gets back to business as usual. And come Season 4, it felt like we'd been through so much together with Jerome Valeska. He'd formed alliances with the Penguin. He'd have brunch meetings with just the Batman Rogues Gallery. He'd be at the dinner table with like Scarecrow and Mr. Freeze, fully suited up. It was like something straight out of Batman the Animated Series. We'd seen kind of the very first Batman versus Joker fight in the Hall of Mirrors in Season 3. And this was pivotal to Batman because this was the point where he decided that he would never kill. But we also saw how Bruce was using that Hall of Mirrors to kind of hide himself in a way that Batman would use shadows to hide himself. But Season 3 of Gotham also really cemented that Batman and Joker dynamic, which culminated in this fight. When Jerome was first killed by Theo Galavan, it was at a gala where he was holding Bruce Wayne hostage and was about to kill him. So naturally, when he awoke in Season 3, he was very eager to just get back to that. So here we have Jerome's obsession with Bruce starting to form. Much like the Joker's kind of affinity for Batman as seen in various comic runs, Batman the Animated Series, and particularly the Batman Arkham series. These two are kind of mortal enemies, yet they're as close as can be, and the Joker is fully aware of that, while Batman is kind of in denial of that. It's the source of a lot of his shame. So after his first actual fight with Jerome, that's when he decides what the difference between he and Jerome is, and that's that he won't kill. What's strange, though, is that this is kind of just a bit of an aside in Jerome's story in the end. Jerome doesn't end up becoming the Joker, but there's also one thing that is consistent about his every appearance, with the exception of Season 3. He's on a revenge quest to kill his biological family, as they were the ones who broke him in the first place. In Season 1, he killed Lila Valeska. In Season 2, he killed his father, the blind fortune teller. And then in season 4, one of the first things he does after breaking out of Arkham Asylum is kill his uncle Zach. And when Zach fights back, we do see at firsthand the brutality that Jerome suffered as a child. We've heard from Jerome of the endless beatings, and an instance of Uncle Zach putting Jerome's hand in boiling soup. And when Uncle Zach fights back and regains control of the situation in one of my 3 soups, he force feeds Jerome the boiling hot soup. And it's after he's rescued by Bruce and Selina that we see a new side to Jerome. Behind that ghoulish, now sewn back on smile is still that vulnerable little boy who was tortured to the breaking point. There's a moment where he sincerely tells Bruce and Selina about how the beatings never stopped and how no one ever helped him. But then he's quickly back to business. When he came to hunt down Uncle Zach, he came with the goal not just of killing him, but finding out where his brother had been hiding. And this is where we're introduced to Jeremiah Valeska. Now, I remember at the time thinking this twin brother plot kind of came out of nowhere. And I remember a lot of people sharing that same sentiment. However, it is thematically in line with his revenge quest that he's been on since his first appearance. Jerome's Uncle Zach was never mentioned before his first appearance in one of my 3 soups, and his inclusion felt very natural. I think the problem with Jeremiah is that it feels like a gimmick and it also doesn't feel necessary. But there are some cool ideas here. Jeremiah Valeska went by the alias of Xander Wild, a reclusive architect living deep underground in a brutalist bunker he called The Maze. This is because he was hiding from the consequences of his actions. Jeremiah Valeska is the orchestrator of all of Jerome's pain. All of the inciting incidents that led to Jerome being beaten senseless by his family members, they were the work of young Jeremiah. But unlike Jerome, Jeremiah was a brilliant whiz kid. So they knew his worth, shipped him off to St. Ignatius School, while Jerome continued to endure the literal torture. Now, there is something I absolutely adore about the framework of this story. That Jerome was ultimately the victim of Jeremiah Valeska, and Jeremiah knew that Jerome was always coming for him, so he completely fortified himself, but regardless, Jerome managed to show up. The Xander Wild alias being this sophisticated alter ego to convince himself of his sanity. But now, the monster he's made has come home to roost. Jerome didn't want to kill Jeremiah. He wanted Jeremiah to just admit it. Jerome is only as fucked up as Jeremiah is and made him to be. And he's hell-bent on sharing the entire Jerome Valeska experience with the entirety of Gotham. As with the help of Scarecrow, he's whipped up a new little concoction. Joker gas. And anyone doused by this stuff enters a lethal laughing fit. Well, when Jerome's plan to gas the entirety of Gotham goes south thanks to Penguin snitching on him, Jim Gordon chased him down to a rooftop, gunning him down to his death. But he dies knowing that he's going to be remembered. Now, I won't lie, I'm not big on Joker speeches where he claims to be an idea. They had that in Suicide Squad 2016's extended cut, with the Joker monologuing about how he's a philosophy. And I think that philosophy is something largely projected by fans trying to rationalize the Joker onto the Joker. But it's not something that I necessarily think the Joker should be entirely aware of himself. In this instance, though, Jerome dies knowing that someone else is going to take up the mantle from him. One way or another, Jeremiah is going to slip, and all of the horrors that made Jerome what he is will be unfurled upon Gotham. It's appropriate in the context of this particular story here. I love the little homage they do to Jack Nicholson's fall to his death back in Batman 1989 when Jerome falls on top of the car. And lo and behold, everything Jerome says would come to pass comes to pass. Jeremiah is doused with a special blend of the Joker gas, and thus the mask is off. And we enter a new chapter in the Gotham Joker story with Jeremiah Valeska. Now, for Jerome's last stand, that's a hell of a story. I get why the title of that episode is called That's Entertainment, because, yeah, they know. Dozens of Batman villains being ordered around by the Joker, the Penguin double-crossing him, that Joker gas. Here's the thing, really. Jerome's story felt complete. It really felt like all that was left for him to do was to get the white makeup and green hair, which is something they could, to be honest, do off-screen. And I will say the beginning of Jeremiah's story is incredibly compelling. At first, it looks like the Joker gas just must have worn off. However, However, we do see some cracks in his facade. The thing is, though, he insists that he is sane. Again, we've got that kind of theme of masking here. And it's later revealed that he's wearing like a skin-colored sort of makeup foundation stuff, and then he's got the bleached Joker face underneath that. That's all happening with the standoff with Bruce Wayne at the cemetery, but meanwhile, Jim Gordon is watching The Last Will and Testament of Jerome Valeska. And again, Jerome is just so entertaining to watch. But it's later revealed that this Last Will and Testament is actually more of a warning from Jeremiah, as it's revealed that it is just Jeremiah wearing prosthetics to look like Jerome. And we get this kind of grand reveal of Jeremiah as the new Joker, kicking Jerome's corpse aside. And also, I love the outfit that Jerome was set to be buried in. It has a very old school Joker look. He's got that tailcoat, waistcoat with the bolo tie, which is very classic Joker. Although I will say my favorite look Jerome has had over the course of the series is his final look in season 4, where he's got kind of that tan breakfast coat and his face has just been sewn back on, so he's still got that very ghoulish look to him. Jerome went out in style, but they really are leaning into the whole in death he's still kind of the Joker, as now his skin is pale because no blood flowing around it or anything. He really does look like the Joker when he's just laying there dead. The thing is, Jeremiah feels more like an acknowledgement of the stories that they maybe missed out on telling by having Jerome return as basically a fully formed version of the Joker out of the box in season 2. Ultimately, all we really end up with here is space. Space for a slower burn origin for the Joker. Space to kind of explore the idea that the Joker is in denial of his insanity. Jeremiah is kind of the inverse of Jerome in that he has that classic Joker look with the white face paint and red lips, but he's still yet to fully form that Joker persona. Ultimately, it felt like a gambit to reset the clocks on their Joker story by finishing Jerome's story, but starting it again with Jeremiah. One thing I will say that I do like about Jeremiah's story, though, is the implication that he was always a sadistic maniac. We see how Jeremiah kind of projects onto Jerome as well, as he tells him earlier that he was born bad, when in actuality that was Jeremiah. It realigns the Joker so that he's no longer a victim, he is the original instigator, and I kinda like that. And his story beginning with denial is actually a really cool idea. Except there's just one little problem. We're already at the end of the 4th season. There's only one season left, and it's a small one. They definitely did not intend to end Gotham when they ended up having to. They didn't cast Bruce that young and have us grow with him just to fast forward 10 years at his finale. And they definitely didn't, reboot the Joker's entire origin story, knowing that they only had a few episodes left to wrap this up. But with Jeremiah at the end of season 4, at the very least, you can see that Joker persona starting to form. Jeremiah's plans are a lot bigger and more grandiose than what Jerome was displayed to have. Jerome wanted to turn the city into a madhouse, while Jeremiah wants to destroy the city and rebuild it in his own image. With Jeremiah as well, we see a bit more of that intellectual side of the character come in that he's incredibly meticulous with the details. The thing that felt kind of jarring about it, though, was that in season 4, it felt like we'd just kind of downgraded. Jerome really tapped back into that playful, high-energy hijinks side to the Joker that I absolutely love. Jeremiah, on the other hand, is more of an artist. He intellectualizes and justifies every crazy thing he does as if it's the sanest thing in the world, as though he were the poster boy for sanity. I understand why you'd want to explore that, but I just think throwing away the character of Jerome was very egregious when we maybe could have tapped into this a bit more. We'd seen that Jerome had a vulnerable side to him. He could have had experiences that might have had him reevaluate his sanity, believing himself to be the only truly sane person, just as Heath Ledger's Joker did. It feels like a big amount of character development is just being unloaded on a character we only just met, but a character that is also tethered to that fan favorite character that was just killed. And because the two are identical, they're going to be compared. I think the show kind of makes the justification that Jerome was kind of a flash in the pan, but ultimately he wasn't smart enough to be the true Joker, and to that I say absolute bullshit. He'd proven sheer unstoppable resourcefulness through his interactions with his Legion of Horribles. Getting that Joker gas made in of itself was a feat. But then I think all of that can be disproven by when Jerome breaks into Wayne Manor in season 3 and threatens to destroy a precious statue. Bruce bluffs, saying that it's worthless, so Jerome drops it onto the carpet. When he drops it, he can gauge Bruce's reaction and find how much it's really worth, and then destroy it. That's really smart and cunning. It's not like ingenuity building bombs levels, but I don't think the Joker needs to necessarily do that. He just needs to be smart enough to get the people he needs to do that for him. Well, he'll still naturally get his hands dirty anyway, because, I mean, he's the Joker. The other sad thing is that everything Jeremiah amounts to could have been done with Jerome. I figured Jeremiah would at least offer an opportunity to have a Joker that isn't obsessed with Bruce Wayne, but could become obsessed with Batman later down the line. As obviously in the future, if the Joker is obsessed with Bruce Wayne, Bruce is never going to get a quiet moment. So Jeremiah is obsessed with Bruce, believing him to be his very best friend, and all Jeremiah wants is to be the absolute most important person in the world to him. So he has two hypnotized actors take on the roles of Thomas and Martha Wayne, given plastic surgery to look just like them, all so that he can be there on the day Bruce lost his parents. And there is a notable shift in Jeremiah's demeanor going from Gotham Season 4 to Season 5. It's like they knew, okay, we've got a limited episode count, he has to act more jokery now. But between seasons, he just became a bit more giggly. He also started doing his eyebrows a little differently. I'll tell you what though, I do like this evolution of Jeremiah. This might be my favorite Joker look in live action, full stop. He's got this violet overcoat that's all glittery. Underneath, he's wearing a pink and black suit, and he's got the white face paint and red lips, also retaining the spooky contact lenses he had in the previous season, but now he's got those angular Joker eyebrows, and his hair looks more green. They'd toyed with some different looks in the production process, one of them being purple hair, but in the end, it appears to be a very sort of dark, shimmery turquoise. And then when hit with warm gels over the lights, it creates a green hair kind of look. So you've got that kind of plausible deniability of them not using every single element of the Joker from the comics, while still creating an image that still very much resembles the Joker, and it looks fantastic. My only issue is I just wish this were Jerome. I mean, hey, pair that makeup with that cut-off face aesthetic that Jerome had, and this could look pretty hard. Although, I won't lie, I do love the back-to-basics approach of Jeremiah and not having all that prosthetics. So anyway, Jeremiah gets prosthetics. The thickest prosthetics yet for his final form. So in a final battle with Bruce at Ace Chemicals, Jeremiah is knocked into the chemical vat. Very much akin to the Joker's sort of Red Hood origin story. But there's something very funny about the image of what looks to be a biblically accurate Joker already falling into a vat of chemicals. It's like, what, you're gonna become the Joker again? You're gonna go Joker 2 on us? Well, the event actually renders him brain dead and largely unrecognizable. Alright, well there you go, that ties in quite well. You can restore the ambiguity to the Joker's origins because Jeremiah Valeska is supposed to be out of action. He's unrecognizable as well now. Put all that clown paint over that disfigured visage, who's gonna know? And because he's effectively woken up from being brain dead, he could have forgotten all this, forgotten about Bruce, and then he can make Batman his hyperfixation. He could have even forgotten his own name. Makes perfect sense, but we actually do get to see him become his final sort of Joker form, which I guess is kind of cathartic, but it's not quite the transformation that I thought it would be. So it turns out he was only pretending to be brain dead because he's just built different that way, and he pretended for a whole 10 years because Bruce Wayne was off training for 10 years and he didn't want to awaken until he saw that Bruce was back. So he's still obsessed with Bruce Wayne. He still remembers his name. Jim Gordon still remembers his name. And while he's got these ghoulish prosthetics on, which I really enjoy, he, if anything, looks less like a comic Joker than Jeremiah's previous form. All he has is a few long, straggly strands of hair, and I tell you what, it's a very effective look, actually. He looks very frightening, but it has the effect of him looking less like an archetypical Joker than he did before. And it seems like he's fully aware that Bruce is Batman as well, so that's surely going to change up some dynamics. Oh, it's over. So what was actually the point of dropping him in the chemical bath, aside from benching Jeremiah for the majority of the season because Cameron Monaghan still had some filming commitments for Shameless? To make him bald, I guess? He's supposed to have had this personality shift into his final Joker form here, but he only gets about 10 minutes of screen time. I'll be honest, I can't help but think we should have just stuck with Jerome and then had him disappear. Have him go off to do something that implies he's about to become the Joker. Or his arrival to becoming the Joker is just symbolic. He never gets the name, he never gets the signature look, but he is ultimately the Joker. That's what we had by the time we reached season 2. Jeremiah's story played with some really interesting themes, but due to circumstances that were clearly out of the writer's control, his story had to be bookended very quickly, and ultimately, the only difference between him and Jerome is that he survived and he's also less sympathetic. But I feel like the sympathy for Jerome was kind of long gone anyway by that point. If Jeremiah was supposed to succeed where Jerome failed, well, neither of them ended up getting their signature Joker look, neither of them ended up calling themselves the Joker, neither of them ended up forgetting their origin stories or anything like that, and neither of them are very well aligned for an ongoing conflict with Batman. Both of these guys know way too much to be long, ongoing threats. I'm not a fan of memory loss stories, but I think we could have really done a whole amnesia storyline for Jerome, maybe around the time that he was resurrected. So now he doesn't even remember what broke him. And that's the point of true liberation. That is the point where he truly becomes the Joker. Maybe that could be a result of Jerome falling into Ace Chemicals. And I think that's the problem with Jeremiah, is his story is actually genuinely pretty cool. Rushed at the end, but pretty cool. But it ultimately just doesn't amount to much that we couldn't have just done with Jerome. Which is why I think when people think the Gotham Joker, they think Jerome before they think Jeremiah. Jerome had the most memorable one-liners, he was funnier, he was just more entertaining, and he was just more what I wanted to see out of the Joker character. The whole cult thing could get a bit meta at times, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. However, it did land us with this idea of a proto-Joker. And in this case, the proto-Joker ends up being the one that's way more interesting. And it's interesting because this idea of the Joker as a lineage didn't end at Gotham. In season 3 of the Batwoman TV series, we meet a character called Marquis Jet, played by Nick Cregan. He was pushed by the media as like the first black actor to play the Joker, and sadly Batwoman and this character ended up becoming kind of a joke. But that's by no means a point against having a black actor as the Joker, because real ones remember that the first black actor to actually play the Joker was Kevin Michael Richardson in the Batman TV series back in 2004. Hell, if you count Party Man, then Prince. Kevin Michael Richardson was just brilliant as the Joker though. I'd like to hear him as the voice of Venom, the symbiote voice inside Eddie's head. Back to Marquis though. However, Marquis Jet is more post-Joker than proto-Joker. And it's worth noting that a lot of the live-action DC shows have kind of gone down this alternate Joker route because they're not allowed to actually use the de facto Joker from the comics. So as a young boy, the original Joker hijacked Marquis' school bus and used an electric joy buzzer on his head. This knocked out his empathy and made him into the new Joker. It's just a lot less interesting than the Jerome and Jeremiah thing. I tell you what though, I did actually not... Nick Cregan didn't really have much to work with, to be honest. So I don't want to rag on the guy's performance or anything like that. He certainly has the charisma down, I guess. In terms of his design, they definitely moved a bit more away from that classic Joker look than what Gotham did. He didn't have any face paint or stretched out mouth or anything like that. He had purple hair and he wore zany suits. He had a white one with like this kind of red lining to it, and I think that was probably his best one. But he also had a suit that paid homage to Joaquin Phoenix's Joker outfit with the big red coat and the yellow waistcoat underneath. Marquis' grand plan was to use Wayne Enterprises to rain acid bombs down on Gotham City, but he'd be cured by Ryan Wilder's Batwoman after she used the same joy buzzer on him again, and it... Sorry, just the writing in this show cracks me up. Marquis gets a happier ending, but we don't even know Marquis well enough to understand why this matters. This only matters as he's not the Joker anymore. He was infected with Jokeritis when he was a kid and spent about 20 years masking the fact that he was a maniac. I mean, I suppose Jeremiah Valeska faked being brain dead for 10 years. These Jokers do have commitment to the bit, it seems, but at least, like, Jeremiah was more established than this. I'm saying that about Jeremiah. This honestly feels like a sabotage, but we've got one more proto-Joker to talk about. And this is where it gets really interesting, because we know that the TV shows are not allowed to use the Joker. He's embargoed for the movies, but our next proto-Joker was in fact called Joker and was in movies. His own movies. And I think this is where Joker 2 really alienated a lot of people. I am one of the few people that actually really enjoyed that movie. I enjoyed it more than the first one, to be honest. And I think it's because while the first film serves as kind of an origin story for the Joker, and you can kind of treat the rest as history, the second one is the deconstruction of the Joker. In Joker 2, he wants to get better, but he's got this fan base now, and they all want him to be the Joker because he's so entertaining. The media don't want to see him get better after what he did, they just want him to stay a monster. And when Gary Puddles testifies against Arthur, Arthur is confronted with the consequences of what the Joker is. Gary was the one person Arthur had any respect for, the one person that ever treated him like a human being. And Gary was now terrified of him. Arthur gives up the Joker, he rejects the Joker. And in his last musical number, he mentions that there's a successor waiting for him. And we see him murdered by someone who also looks very Jokerish. Meaning that Arthur Fleck did not, in fact, go on to become the de facto Joker of Gotham. And I think a lot of people really hated this because they had largely accepted Joker 2019 as a de facto origin story for the Joker because it felt very relevant and it was a really compelling movie. So the second movie saying, well, actually, no, he's not the Joker. I really love that movie for what it is as a standalone piece. And I wasn't as on board with Joker 2019 being a de facto origin as I think a lot of DC fans were, which I think enabled me to just enjoy Joker 2 for what it was. But I will say that in this case, yes, the whole proto-Joker thing is just kind of awkward. Because when the real Joker steps in, when that true clown prince of crime rocks up and becomes Batman's arch nemesis, are people not going to bring up that there was already a criminal called the Joker that did similar stuff? And I think that's the problem with proto-Jokers. It's very difficult for the actual Joker ever to escape their shadow. But what I think Joker 2 did right was that they ended the story there. They didn't pass the perspective on, we don't actually have to worry about it, we will never see that version of Gotham ever again. In the case of Jerome and Jeremiah, they fully embraced the ties that those two characters had. And I think executed quite a strange idea very well, but I can't exactly call it a successful showcase of a proto-Joker because once again, the first one is way more interesting than the second. Which is why, even though Jerome Valeska, the original proto-Joker, may be one of my favorite Batman villains ever, it's largely just because to me, the whole proto-Joker thing is irrelevant. To me, he just is the Joker. And in an official capacity, I would have preferred if Cameron Monaghan at least just had the chance to play the Joker. But I can't fault them on the ambition of their story. At the end of the day, though, the origins of a proto-Joker can be traced even further. At the end of the day, the proto-Joker concept is just an extrapolation of the three Jokers concept from the comics. During the Darkseid War arc, Batman would become a god of knowledge when he sits on the Mobius chair and asks it who the Joker really is. And the chair tells him that there are three. This concept would then be explored in a comic book called Batman: The Three Jokers, a 3-issue miniseries that released under the DC Black Label banner, and revealed that the Joker was in fact three people working together. This also explained away the different personalities and characterizations that the Joker has exhibited in the comics over the years. The criminal was your sort of methodical Golden Age Joker. He's the leader of the group. The clown is more of your Silver Age Joker, much more excitable and playful. He's the one that did the laughing fish, and he's also the Joker that killed Jason Todd. And then the comedian is more the modern age sort of post-killing joke Joker. This is the one that paralyzed Barbara Gordon. And it's heavily implied that he is the original. By the end of the story, though, it ultimately boils down to one, and that is the modern age Joker. Modern age Joker kills the leader, and Jason Todd takes care of the Joker that killed him. It's quite cathartic. And it certainly offers a take on the three Jokers idea. You have that exploration here. Also, it's clear that Jeff Johns had a favorite Joker portrayal, sheesh. However, now, since 2024, the comics have distanced themselves from the concept of the Joker being multiple people. In 2024, DC released Joker Year 1. This would serve as an in-continuity addressal of the three Jokers theory. After all, the Mobius chair stating that there were three was something that happened in the main continuity. Joker Year One, on the other hand, moves away from the idea, though. The Joker being a singular person, but with three different personalities, each distinct, and he uses these three different personalities to adapt to different situations. This feeds back into the concept of super-sanity, which was explored in Batman Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on a Serious Earth. It was stated that the Joker's ability to reinvent himself as though he were a brand new person just born every day is a form of super-sanity. I think Jeremiah would be pleased. So the Joker's three personalities in the canon comics now are that mischievous, clownish Joker, that demonic, nasty psychopath, and the calm killer. So much like the three Jokers we had presented in the Three Jokers storyline. And I gotta say, I much prefer this approach. It just makes the Joker far more terrifying knowing that this could all be the work of one person. One person who's just seemingly invincible. And ultimately, this ties back into my complaints with Jerome and Jeremiah. We didn't need to kill Jerome and replace him with Jeremiah to explore these concepts. The answers are there in the Joker's versatility, his survival instincts, his super-sanity. It's just funny how amazing Jerome Valeska is as a character, but then as a concept, he's just kind of lame. The idea of a proto-Joker, someone who did it all first, and inspired this kind of madness onto someone else. If we want to bring back elements of Jerome Valeska, it should be about the performance and the way he acted, not the notion of multiple Jokers. I'll tell you what though, it would actually be amazing if James Gunn's DCU Batman maybe took some nods from Gotham. I think Gotham effectively handed the perfect Batman Rogues Gallery cast to them on a silver platter. I absolutely loved Paul Dano as the Riddler, and Colin Farrell as the Penguin, but I also relish any opportunity to see Robin Lord Taylor and Corey Michael Smith back, and given that we are having a brand new Batman reboot, it could actually be really cool to kind of build on top of the foundations laid down by Gotham. Could retcon a few things here and there, but I'd also really love to see Cameron Monaghan play the Joker proper in that universe, and it seems like he's the right age to do that now. I don't know, James Gunn, maybe give him a call? I don't know. Sadly, I doubt it. After all these years, I tell you what, it's been great returning to Gotham and just talking about Jerome again. Do I need excuses to talk about this show and its characters anymore? If you are one of my earliest audience members who's been waiting a while for more Gotham stuff, I appreciate you being here today. As I say, I want to keep revisiting Gotham. There's a lot to unpack with that show, so this is absolutely the time to keep tuning in. And now, of course, I'm just going to cap off the video by thanking my patrons. In the $5 and above tiers, we have KB, Twilord, Biotin, Cyrus the Skeptic, and Mr. SP. Kale Bennett, oh, he finally updated the ending. Dare Denny, Sad Goku, Ghostly Phantom, Xanderwolf, Channel Pup, just another evil robot clone claiming discarded naming rights. Alright, it's your initials. Vera Wild, Kalex, RT0, Cho Henshin, Marv Animation, Grant Allen, Josh Strider, Silver, Monalza, Ben Raven, Basic Content, Gideon Wells, Press Play to Jason, and Joseph Tribble. Thank you folks so much for your generosity. It really means a lot. Now go watch something else now.